Herpetoculture podcast. How you going, Luke?
Good, mate. Good. I'm very excited tonight.
Same. Hopefully I don't have too bad technical issues again. It's looking that way at the start. But
you're pretty much blanking out for all of Steve's episode last week, which is a bit unfortunate.
It was good to
listen. You had a rain cloud above your butt.
Yeah, thunderstorm. Now I've got no excuse. I don't know what's happening. But anyway, let's get stuck into the riders. Let's see it. Yeah, it's coming. Just got to get to the shops. So.
That sounds good. All right, well, we will get stuck in. So tonight, guys, we are joined by Adam Brice from Wild Nature. Adam is a killer photographer and a herper that's been racking up some awesome photos all over WA for some time now. Adam, thanks for joining us tonight and welcome to the show.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know we've been trying to get you on for a little while now, or mentioning it at least, but it's nice to finally sit down with you and actually have a chat, which is good.
Yeah, there's been a couple of comments thrown here and there on my photos and in chat and whatnot trying to get me on the channel, so it's good to finally be here.
Yeah. It was actually really good to meet you in person the other week down at Illawarra at the show down there. It's always nice putting a face to a name.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Even just at that show, I met people that I've been Facebook friends for like years and just finally met in person.
Yeah. It's funny how that works. Hey, I struggle with it sometimes because I don't put people's faces and names together really well. Like I can remember knowing somebody's face, but I can't remember the name of said person or whatever. I really struggle with that sort of stuff. But,
especially when you chat to them online quite a bit, backwards and forwards, and then you kind of meet them and you're like, it's almost odd to start off with, and then it's like you start talking, it's like, oh, hang on, no, it's all good.
Yeah, well, especially depending on like their profile. A lot of people don't put up photos, especially reptile people, don't put up photos of themselves as a profile picture or anything. It might be a snake or a lizard or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like you actually started out with landscape photography. Or actually, sorry, let me just backtrack here a little bit. What actually got you started in reptiles in general? Was it starting with landscape photography and just kind of coming across these guys out there, or what was the story?
No, I think like a lot of us as, children, and especially growing up in rural southwest in Western Australia, you think I probably would have been exposed to, things like snakes and lizards on an almost daily basis, but, the opposite is probably true. Didn't see a heck of a lot, growing up, but was always fascinated with the wild, with wild nature and, the natural world and that sort of thing. And, we, as kids, we grew up on David Attenborough and, Steve Irwin and everything like that, and wanting to emulate, people like that and look up to people like that. But actually never thought about photographing anything at all, or even really working with them for that matter. So the fact that I'm here where I am now is, quite strange, because I'm, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have even considered, photographing a highly venomous snake. So even when I picked up a camera in 2011 for the first time, no, didn't even consider it. Just went straight into landscapes, like a lot of my peers and friends on Facebook at the time were into landscapes, and I just sort of followed suit. So, probably a really slow start to, getting into the scene, into the world of reptiles. So I started, as I said, in 2011, first picked up a camera. I was just started working away, actually, in Port Hedland, and just seeing some of the landscapes and some of the critters that were, around camp, like the green tree frogs, the desert tree frogs and stuff like that. And I'd just take little snaps of them and then, take photos of the landscapes, and then realize just how rich and diverse the landscapes were within that region. And just through different photography forums, started following other people on those forums and on Facebook that were solely dedicated landscape photographers, and I just learnt what I could from them. So purely went the self-teaching route and, decide, well, I'll see if I can take some landscape shots. And so I just sort of slowly plugged away at that and just started getting a lot of tips and help from a lot of people who I'm still friends with now, which is great. So, yeah. But, yeah, that still never really thought about photographing reptiles or even wildlife for that matter at that point. I probably couldn't even put it down to a pivotal point of, when I decided to change from, landscapes to wildlife. I'll say wildlife because I pretty much photograph any, wild critters running around out there.
Yep.
So, not just snakes and lizards, although they are my main focus. But I do remember one time, and we were releasing a mulga snake. Oh, well, we were about to release a mulga snake just outside of camp in Port Hedland. And I thought, you know what? I should try and get a couple of photos of these. We've caught so many of these snakes and so many different species just within that region. But, yeah, I've tried landscapes. Just try and take a few quick shots of this mulga snake as we release it. So we travelled out to the release point, and we had the snake in a bin, so it was going to be nice and easy just to open up the bin, lay the bin down, and I'll get some photos of the snake as it comes slithering out. So I turned to my friend and co-worker, got him to open up the bin. We had just travelled 2 kilometres down a bumpy road, mind you. So he's gone, unclipped the top of the bin, opened the lid, and this mulga snake just shot straight out the top and bolted for the bush. I got one shot as it was retreating, and that was it. Yeah, the arse end of the mulga snake as it took off into the Spinifex. And that was pretty much my first foray into, photographing these snakes and realising it was going to be quite an effort to try and get a somewhat decent shot of a snake.
Yeah.
But I think slowly after that point, I decided, well, I'll just try taking a few more shots of these snakes that we capture. So, and then when we got the coppertail whip snakes and that sort of thing, so I was able to practice on them quite regularly because we used to catch them quite a lot around camp. So I was able to get to practice on, a very fast and agile snake, which certainly helped too.
Yeah.
But yeah, from then on in, I just sort of, slowly progressed from there.
Did it kind of just become like a little bit of an addiction after a while? Like, once you'd kind of taken a half decent photo of one snake, you had to kind of better it, and then you started like discovering more effect. Species. Yeah.
It certainly got addicting. I'm not sure whether, I was out there to try and be the best snake photographer in the world. I was just purely thinking that I just wanted a half-decent shot of the snake,
Yeah.
But as soon as I started delving into the world of, reptile photography, I realized exactly how many people were doing it. And I started seeing all these incredible photos and just sort of thinking to myself, yeah, I want to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So I made a conscious effort, I think, after seeing, many people's work from, Matt Somerville, Nick Volp, Ross McGibbon, all those guys, and following them on Facebook and Flickr and, eventually Instagram and whatever other social media platforms out there. And, wanted to try and emulate them and produce some of the images that they were able to produce. So, yeah, at that point, I pretty much made that conscious step to just move away from landscapes and that sort of thing and start focusing on, wildlife and, snakes and reptiles.
Yeah. You're also a pretty keen hiker, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So surely that's kind of put you in contact with a few species, or you're kind of like combining the two loves at the same time?
Yeah, I did a lot of hiking growing up, and did a lot of hiking with my kids, especially throughout the Stirling Ranges. Can't say it put me in line with a lot of reptiles out there. Certainly wildlife in general, and we did come across the odd snake and lizard and that sort of thing. But honestly, I think we didn't see a whole great deal out there. Heath monitors, crevice skinks, and the occasional tiger snake. When we find a tiger snake at the top of Mount Toolburn while we were summiting this mountain one year, and it's quite odd to see it 1,000 meters up.
Yeah.
Something that's you'll find in lowland swamplands and all that. So there he is, 1,000 meters up the top of a mountain. But yeah, there he was.
So what do you reckon your biggest difference switching from landscape photography to reptile photography actually is? Like, is it like the setup or the styles and things that you're using? Because
your subject can kill you.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Essentially, landscapes don't move a hell of a lot.
Yeah,
you just have to wait for the light to be perfect.
Yeah. Have you noticed your gears kind of evolved a little bit more as the more you've pursued the reptile photography side of things? Like the more your gears kind of evolved to suit that. Like obviously with landscape, tripod, filters, and all that. But as you've got into reptiles, there's different lenses and all that kind of things. Have you found you've kind of evolved more that way with gear?
Yeah, look, I think no matter what genre that you choose to photograph, you're always going to have a plethora of gear to choose from. Landscapes as well, because you're going to shoot with everything from a wide angle to, a standard like nifty 50 through to 85 mil. I've seen people photograph landscapes with telephoto lenses. So you can use exactly the same lenses for reptile and wildlife photography. So it's just utilizing them in different ways.
Yep.
And instead of relying solely on natural light as you would in landscapes, we utilize a lot of artificial light for fill flash and that sort of thing when we're photographing reptiles. Other wildlife is a little different, where we use natural light if you can't get close to certain lizards, or whether you're photographing mammals. So you'll be using natural light and telephoto lenses and your own stealth. But the gear is just sort of adapted to suit whatever genre you choose to photograph. So for us, it's everything from wide angle macro lenses to standard macro lenses, and then softboxes and flash modifiers and all the sorts of fun toys we get to play with. So
you've got a pretty like I was just going through your Facebook page not too long ago, and you got a pretty awesome picture with you with one of those big umbrella flashes. It's a pretty sizey flash.
A bit of a love affair with those softboxes from some of the memes I've seen you post.
Yeah. So my favourite brand being the SMDV. One of the guys out there, they just produce a really great softbox, and it creates brilliant light. I mean, I can't really fault them. I love using them, and I've used them for a lot of years now. So unfortunately, they stopped the S40. Which was just a good size, 40 centimeters is a nice, manageable softbox. But now I've got a ridiculous, 60 centimeter monstrosity. But, the light is still great. It may be a little bit cumbersome once it's unfurled and, ready for action, but it still produces, magnificent light.
Yeah, I've just got one of those handheld softboxes, but I'm yet to try it out, so I'm keen to give it a crack.
They're great.
Jason will be down his local pond soon enough, no doubt.
Yep.
Well, I just love how versatile it is. You can basically just angle light from any direction.
And basically put it where you want it.
Yeah, exactly. So, And you can get all sorts of different effects just shooting the same subject from, the same camera angle, but just changing lighting and just making a completely different image. I think that's just fantastic.
I think that's one of the benefits of artificial lighting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you have to take a look at what Gecko was doing with that. What was it, Cayman or something like that, where he was backlighting the Cayman and through that. That was an awesome shot.
Yeah, he's been experimenting with lighting for a long time, and he's very proficient at it, and I love his work.
Yeah.
So, what camera do you actually use? Like, what's your kind of go-to setup?
My go-to setup is my venom-encrusted Canon 7D Mark II. I've had that for several years now. It's an old camera, but you know what? I love it. It's been through the mud and shit with me for, a number of years now, and it still keeps going. It just doesn't stop. It's been bitten by nearly everything, and it just keeps going.
Battle scars.
Yeah. And the main lens I typically use would be the Lauer 15mm f4 wide-angle macro lens, which quite a lot of people within the reptile photography genre shoot with. So I'll do that for a lot of full body shots and environment shots.
Yeah.
But I also use a standard 60mm macro, so I pretty much only swap between those two lenses, unless I'm targeting things like really quick dragons where you can only shoot, using telephoto or something like that. But it's pretty much a Lauer and 60mm plus my softbox. But I also use a Cygnus Tech flash modifier. Yeah. Made by a good friend of mine. So they do, and that does a brilliant job. So, for your standard macro.
Yeah, I like that diffuser. I've got one of those as well.
Yeah, I've had every iteration of it as it's evolved over the years. He's done well. And he's done a lot of trial and error, and it's all the work that I haven't had to do to make my own, so it's great.
Exactly.
You can just buy it off someone else.
They're pretty much a custom thing for your setup as well. Like you kind of tell him what you're using essentially, and he makes it for it, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So you tell him what flash, camera, and lens you're using, and he'll measure it up and basically customize the modifier to suit your particular gear. So he's
one thing that I noticed that you're really into as well is like not only reptiles and snakes, obviously, but you do photograph a lot of arachnids. So that probably comes in handy for that, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the Cygnus Tech, certainly does come in real handy. But it gives you a free hand as well, and that certainly helps with reptiles as well. When you've got a free hand spare, as opposed to photographing, highly venomous snakes with a softbox. Having that diffuser, gives you that extra mobility, I guess, and a chance to sort of get away or avoid or move something out of the way with a free hand, as opposed to you won't be able to do that with a softbox. Although the softbox, has its own uses. It's a good shield. Yeah. It's an impromptu hide box. If the snake decides to slither off, you put the softbox down on top of it and just curl up underneath it.
That's not a bad idea. I never thought of that. Little trick of the trade.
You don't need to even bring your plant saucer.
Yeah.
So on the topic of venomous snakes, where did you actually kind of master the art of doing that? Was that just in Port Hedland where you were kind of catching and releasing a lot of these animals, or?
Yeah, so it's that gave me a lot of different subject matter to practice on, definitely. But slowly over the years, I've gleaned information and skills off, various people from, Ross McGibbon, Brian Bush, and a few other people within the industry that, have just helped. Basically, I'd look at from people around the world as well, photographing everything from boas and vipers to, anaconda and that sort of thing, and just wanting to substitute that snake for one of our own, and, and just, that pose is nice, and, that way of photographing the environment's great, utilizing different lighting methods and that sort of thing. So it's just gleaning information from everywhere and wanting to emulate and reproduce, well, not necessarily reproduce, but find a way of producing my own images in that kind of light as well. So, so it's just a multitude of people and just learning off them, and more importantly, learning the subject matter as well, because to photograph animals like that, you need to really know them to put yourself within the firing line. Because if you don't know the animal, you're just going to get tagged, especially when you're dealing with highly venomous snakes. So obviously, especially the more you know about them.
15 mil too, nice and close as well.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's where a lot of people that photograph these animals with the wide-angle macro lens feel more comfortable is, up close and personal with these animals. So obviously we have to be able to understand, read, and know what these animals are capable of and predict what they're going to be able to do when we're photographing them. But that also comes down to the individual animal as well, obviously. So I'm sure you've met some snakes that are more flighty or more defensive or whatever than others, and some that are just placid as, pythons.
Yeah.
So it just comes down to adapting animal to animal as we find them out there, and knowing how far you can sort of push yourself and how much they will tolerate, our sort of presence and being in that close proximity.
Definitely.
I suppose, as you say, everything's got its own threshold, and that can come down to an individuality, as you said. So,
I've met some snakes, or some mulga snakes, that I can literally sit my lower that far away, like an inch from its snout, and it doesn't care, whereas other ones you can't get, a meter from it without it launching at you. So, it's just down to the individual snake and being able to, properly read that snake's body language and tolerance levels towards us being so close.
Oh, that's crazy. I mean, you've definitely got way more gusto in that department than I ever would.
Same here.
I think the craziest thing I ever did, if you could call it that, was a GoPro on a very short stick in front of a mulga snake. And let's just say it was somewhat secured. So, that was about as brave as I got. So with having done all this, you must have had some close calls, right? Like there must have been a few times where snakes have kind of bounced off your diffuser or something like that, and you've kind of second-guessed what you're doing?
I don't know whether... Yeah, look, we've had close calls, and I think anyone that says that they don't, we should probably have another look at, what they photographed over the years and say, well, we've had a few close calls. But I don't think there's any point where I've actually second-guessed what I've done. I would probably, after the fact, think back and just look, how could I have done things differently?
Yep.
Sometimes it's just being too enthusiastic and trying to jump in there too quickly. And it's not being, overconfident or blasé about the whole situation. It's just, you can come across some extraordinary animals and you just want to get stuck into it.
Yeah.
And get a little bit carried away. But it sort of gets to the point where you have to trust your own skill and knowledge about these animals and, your own observations over the years, both photographing and catching and releasing these animals. And you have to be able to rely on that as well as rely on the people around you that sort of help you photograph the animals as well. So, so all these things go hand in hand. I do remember one particular close call where a good friend of mine, Bryn Arkle, and I were setting up to release a Western Brown. And I look back now and think, yeah, purely my own fault, with how close this snake got to actually tagging me. But as we were setting up and I was getting it out of the catch bag, I just saw his tail and just, reached in to grab it, as you do. But just for some reason, I just didn't even think of, well, where's the head?
Yeah.
So I grabbed the tail and this head just comes shooting out the bag. Instinctively, I've dropped my hand and sort of let go at the same time as this Western Brown literally shot straight over the top. Like the bottom of his jaw pretty much tapped the top of my hand as he went over. And that would probably be the closest and probably the only time that sort of happened, really. So, I mean, we do a lot of things to help, mitigate the risk out there, and everything from knowledge of the animal to having competent people around you. But at the end of the day, it's going to be human error every time if one of us gets bitten. But that's part of the fun, I guess. We can only, as Brian Bush would say, it's inevitable that you're going to get bitten the more you play with these animals, or the more you photograph these animals. You just can't constantly expose yourself in such a way where you think it's just not ever going to happen, because one day it's just going to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
One day your guard's going to be down, or just simple mistake. You're going to sneeze or swat a fly, and the snake's going to take a crack at you, and inevitably that point will probably come one day where I'll get tagged. Hope it doesn't, and I really don't want to be bitten, but you just never know. But we obviously do all we can to,
that's right,
to mitigate the risk.
Yeah.
So if you had to kind of give somebody that's getting into reptile photography, in particular with venomous snakes, some tips about getting into venomous snake photography on staying safe,
yep.
What were some of your biggest suggestions be?
I would say do a snake awareness or even a snake catching course, first and foremost, because these are just invaluable skills that you're going to learn. Because if you're never exposed to these sort of animals, you've only got what you see on social media, what you've heard from neighbours, what you read in books or see on TV. And a lot of it's hyped up. When you're actually confronted with these animals, you just realise exactly how placate they are, I guess you could say, and how timid they are and how shy they are, and how they just don't want anything to do with us. So, doing snake awareness courses and snake catching courses is just only going to help kickstart your knowledge into these animals. And the more you start studying these animals and the more you learn about them, obviously the better equipped you're going to be, at least in your mind, that that these animals. Like I said, I didn't start photographing them until several years after snake catching. I first started snake catching, so I already had, learnt quite a lot. Mainly through Brian Bush, and he'd always feed me new information, scientific papers that come out, and I would learn pretty much as I could about these animals, because I was just addicted to wanting to know more about these animals, because I wanted to be able to, work with them more confidently and safely. And ultimately, the more knowledge that you can garner, the better you're going to be for it once you're out there. Once you know the animal, their environment, their different defensive styles, and that sort of thing. It's this is knowledge that's all worthwhile, and all that you keep in the back of your mind every time you come across one. and being able to identify them out in the field is a big thing too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, first and foremost, would be snake awareness, snake catching courses, and then basically learning what's in your area first.
Yeah.
So, learning what snakes and other reptiles within your certain region, within a 50, 100 kilometre radius or whatever, and just start observing them. Start, looking at them in the wild, seeing how close you get to them, how they react. Obviously being, respectable distance. When you see these animals just doing their own thing in nature, it's quite beautiful. Just seeing a snake slither about, hunting for food, or or whether they might be, performing ritualistic combat between two male snakes, or or whatever. Just observing them out in the wild, and knowing how you can behave around them as well.
Yeah.
And what's going to set them off. I mean, 9 times out of 10, you get close to a snake, it's just going to take off into the bush every time.
That's right. I guess one thing is too is if you're starting to learn, you don't always have to go after venomous snakes too. There's a million other different species that you can learn on first too. If you don't,
exactly.
As well, so.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about working in the Pilbara is that we just pretty much, there's just a whole wide range of species that that we're able to catch and relocate. Everything from monitor lizards to venomous snakes and pythons, and even small skinks and frogs. From people's toilets and air cons and that sort of thing. So we had just a multitude of different subject matter to choose from to practice. So that was really handy.
What actually got you into snake catching? Like, was there, obviously you were just kind of starting to get into them a little bit and you wanted to kind of further yourself, as you've kind of mentioned now, or was there like a particular job role that you had that was involved with it?
Yeah, so basically performing my duties in the security and emergency response, part of those duties was the catch and relocation of, highly venomous reptiles, which, was just part of the job, and that's all I started thinking of it as. It was a fun part of the job too, but seriously didn't think of anything else other than just doing it as part of just my duties.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome. Pretty good gig to kind of get stuck into it. So
yeah, and especially in the Pilbara where you just got all the snakes you can choose from, really. Just
What were some of the species that were most common for you out there?
This was specifically around the camps, or where I was. Pretty much mulga snake and western brown were the two common large leopards.
Yep.
And then coppertails as well, coppertail whip snake. So they were probably the three main snakes we would get around camp more often than not. And then basically the occasional black-headed python, Stimsons, or children's python as they're known by these days. And, desert banded snakes, ringed brown snakes. I even had a little spotted snake one time. So, we had a few different things, but, the main ones were basically a mulga snake, coppertail, and western brown.
I have to ask, because obviously Jason and I haven't been to WA to look for these ourselves, but around that kind of landscape where you were, what sort of gecko species were you kind of finding commonly around through there?
Gahara species are pretty common, but they're common pretty much everywhere. And a pain in the ass to ID anywhere. But, strophs, you get your northern spiny tails there. We get them quite a lot around camp, as well as the usual Asian house geckos. The Casium stenodactylus, get them on the sand plain out there as well as Nephorus, Lavis pilbarensis, your pilbara smooth knobtail gecko. Literally found one of them just outside camp, which is really cool.
That's pretty awesome.
That's right.
Yeah, I wasn't even looking for it. I was actually chasing spiders at that time. There's a large wolf spider I was after. And found this little knobtail gecko. I thought, that's pretty cool.
They're impressive when you do see them out in the wild, though, because they've got some legs to them. They like to run.
Yeah, I'm yet to see one.
Yeah, they've got what I like to call swagger.
Yeah.
Got a bit of attitude too, some of them.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I've been bit by a few of them.
Yeah.
Did you come across Strophyurus at all?
Yes, down in the Midwest, yeah.
Yep, nice.
Yep. Yeah, so they're a gorgeous gecko. They're not probably as ornately marked as a lot, but those yellow interspaces on the tail are quite magnificent. I love that, and I've photographed that a few times.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
But they're a great little stroph, they really are. And I've found many throughout the Midwest, so pretty much the common gecko that you will see out there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sounds like I might have to make a trip over there, Luke.
Yeah, so Payne's fine. Yalgoo, you'll find plenty there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very keen to do WA. I really want to do a few trips there.
Yeah, same.
We are spoiled for choice. Well, we were spoiled for choice over there, but it is hard work. You have to cover a lot of Ks.
Yeah.
But,
kind of similar to the NT in that sort of sense where, if you really want to see a big diversity, especially with the arid country, you do need to drive a bit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's quite a lot of species you get around Perth, but Perth has just got, in my opinion anyway, quite boring habitat.
Yeah.
I like getting out in the arid regions, and I'm quite fond of arid Australia. Always have been and always will be, I think. So I just love it.
Were you exposed to the arid centre from an early age, or was that something that when you discovered it, you were kind of like, oh, this is just like a bit of a magnet for you?
I think the appreciation developed probably through landscape photography. And when a mate of mine and I decided to go down through Carragini and photograph some of the landscapes out there, and my appreciation for the diverse landscapes that you go through just to get to Carragini, where you start from flat, floodplains and Spinifex, and you just get through to these deep gorges and canyons and waterfalls and stuff like that, just in the middle of the desert. Is just quite amazing. And photographing, these amazing landscapes and just falling in love with the richness of it, the rich colour, the harshness, of the environment around there, from the jagged rock to, the extreme temperatures that you get. And then looking more closely within that habitat and environment and realising that there's a plethora of life, moving amongst the rocks and Spinifex and sand, and thinking it's just magic. It really is. And
you can see why you fell in love with landscape photography over there as well. Like, you see some of the images that people take over there, and it's absolutely breathtaking. And like you said, you get drawn to the landscape, and then you find like a plethora of life in those little micro habitats in those landscapes. So it's kind of, another avenue to go down with photography.
Yeah, exactly. Where every, bundle of Spinifex and, eucalypt is just its own little ecosystem, where you see just all these different invertebrates and mammals and reptiles and all that just relying on, the habitat that's out there and utilising it in such a way that they thrive. And it's amazing to see in such a harsh environment.
Yeah, there's so many different types of animals out there.
Yeah.
It's crazy when you are in that sort of habitat and you're looking around during the day or whatever, and you can't see any tracks across the sand dunes or anything, and then you go there the next morning or something, and there's just like all these little hundreds and thousands of footprints everywhere, and you're going, man, what did I miss? It was like a party out here the night before or something. Yeah. For our overseas listeners that may not have actually come in contact with Spinifex, can you describe to them what it's like to stick your hands into a bit of tussock grass?
Well, I think we've all chased, lizards and geckos and snakes through Spinifex, and it's pretty much like trying to grab an echidna, I reckon. So, it's very spiky, and I've been pierced that many times. Knelt on it, sat on it, rolled on it, put my hand in it. Yeah, it's not fun. But we do what we do.
Take refuge there.
Yeah, and we do what we do to try and get closer to these animals. And I've literally been photographing animals like desert death adders or pilbara death adders, and just you would move to try and get the shot, and your hand would get pierced by Spinifex, but you just don't care. You had to get the shot. They'd pull your hand off the spinning and patch up your wounds.
It is, as you say, like little micro habitats like that, and you can see why the animals use them. What always amazes me though is especially a lot of those little geckos that are Spinifex specialists, like Elderai
and stuff.
Elderai, that's what I was trying to think of. They're such smooth, little, tiny, delicate geckos. You'd think if they were to fall in that, they'd be goners, but they seem to be able to just jump down into it like it was nothing.
Yeah, they're just amazing. They'll just drop and disappear into this stuff. You think, how are you not a gecko kebab right now?
Yeah. So, correct me if I'm wrong again, but you have done a little bit of herping up through the Kimberley region, through to Darwin and Top End?
Yeah, so about 2 years ago now, I think, my mate Dylan and I, we decided to, our original plan was to go after the Western Desert taipan, but COVID sort of ruined that, and they shut down all the remote Aboriginal communities, so we weren't allowed out there. So our plan B was then just to go up through the Kimberley and into the Top End and see how we went from there. So, a couple of years ago we decided to do that. And I flew up to Broome, and we sort of started from there.
Wow. So what was like the change in habitat compared to like what you're used to, around Port Hedland and that? Can you kind of describe how it was different up there?
There were more trees.
That's a good start.
and there was actual elevation, So just basically because it's a whole wetter environment up there. So you've got all these river systems and trees, your large boab trees, amongst other things. And just everything's so much greener and wetter compared to, inland Pilbara or even coastal Pilbara where I was in Port Hedland. So we pretty much have a ongoing joke there that there's a dome over Port Hedland where it just doesn't rain. Once we got into the Kimberley, it was just everything was just so lush and wet and new for me. So it was a really great experience, and then just finding new animals. Kicking off the trip where the frill neck lizard was great.
Awesome.
Just in Broome. So
yeah, it would be a massive change because obviously having those kind of a bit more tropical species and stuff like that, it would really kind of freshen it up for you, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first night, was it the second night? No, the first night, I think we stopped off at the limestone ranges and found the limestone range, marbled gecko and, Kimberley morph of the brown tree snake and, magnificent tree frog, and these are just great to start, ticking off and seeing in the wild and photographing. So, it was good.
Have you been lucky enough to go up towards Mitchell Plateau on the hunt for roughies?
No, it was something that we wanted to do come the dry season, but sort of, the plans changed, because obviously you can't get up there in the wet because everything's just closed off. But it's just unfortunately it was something I never got to do. I definitely want to go back and search for them. So both that and Owen Pelly. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
OMP always looks pretty good.
Yeah. I've got so many friends that have found it, even with some that weren't even looking for it, and they find it. It's like,
seems a lot more people are finding them now compared to Roughies.
yeah, actually, haven't seen too many pictures of Roughies recently. So
yeah,
I think that comes down to accessibility.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just about to say that. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like whilst the OPs are still a very rare snake, I think it's a lot easier to get to have the shot.
yeah.
So yeah, have you gone for OPs before, Adam? Have you tried to find them? I think we might have lost him here. Can you hear us, Adam?
Yeah, we sort of tried when we went across the top end, but it was everything was sort of flooding around us, so probably wasn't really ideal conditions to herp. So it was extremely wet when we were there, and roads were getting closed off everywhere. So access was greatly reduced. Especially around where Owen could be found, and all through Kakadu pretty much as we travelled around, just places were just closed off because it was all flooded and too dangerous. So unfortunately, just a bad time of year for us, where it was just too wet and hot as hell.
Yeah. Oh, there's some crazy roads up there as well, and we definitely came across our fair share of roadblocks, that's for sure. Yeah. All right, well, let's go a little bit further south. Imbricata. Let's talk a little bit about Imbricata, because they seem to be like the bane of anybody that's into Morelia's existence to find.
Yeah,
I know it's taken Matt a fair few years to be able to tick Imbricata off the list. So, how have you found them as a species to find?
They're a really funny snake to try. I mean, you literally can't target it. It's almost a bonus species that you may come across once in a blue moon. The funny thing is, I've never actually gone out specifically herping for, Imbricata. I've just pretty much stumbled across them.
Yeah.
And, this majority have been through road cruising, and then they just suddenly pop up out of nowhere, and in weird places. And one, I was actually talking to my partner on the phone, and I thought, it'd be pretty cool if I found a python right about now. And literally 5 minutes later, I stumbled across an Imbricata crossing the track. Midday, and I think it was about mid-20s.
Yeah.
During the day, and there it was. But it's one of those species that you just can't target. You could be in the right habitat, reasonable conditions, and just find everything but. But we were fortunate enough to live in an area, or live near an area, where we seem to come across them probably more often than not. South of Mandurah, there's a pretty decent population there. But again, I've had other mates go down there and just luck out every time, just not find a thing. They'll find everything that we find, your chance banded snakes and and bardics and stuff like that, but just never come across Imbricata. So, you couldn't even give anyone tips on, where to find them and how to find them, because, they're just one of these bonus species that will pop up.
Basically just stumble across it.
Yeah.
When you say, like, they sometimes just pop up in weird places, like, what do you mean by that? Like, are you just saying, like, habitat that just doesn't seem like it would suit a carpet python?
No, habitat, well, I guess sometimes. There's a particular place down where we normally herp, but it's basically just houses, and you'll come across an Imbricata crossing the street, or something like that, in between, the neighbourhood. shanty village out there, or yes, stuff like that, and some that have been in just relatively clear areas, where there's no trees and anything like that, and scrubs only like up to your knee. And you think, well, where do you go? Where do you hide? So yeah,
just a bit of luck of the draw.
Yeah, but it's always interesting finding it in suburbia. I mean, it's within their natural habitat and recently, probably cleared within the last 10 years. But yeah, and then just to find them cruising through the houses and stuff is always interesting.
I suppose if they're like most carpet pythons on the east coast, though, they're probably they're going to adapt pretty quickly to living in homes, soon enough.
Yeah. Well, we probably find less. This probably happens less and less really over there. I don't think. With coastal carpet pythons and all that, you just seem to hear about them everywhere. Across the east coast, and the exact opposite is probably what Perth's like. Like you were very. I mean, there's some places in there where they will see them, but it's not like you hear about them all the time and you find them in every second backyard and that sort of thing. It's just nothing like that. Their populations are so, sporadic that, they just sort of, have little pockets here and there that, they may occur in and people may see them. But, they just, they are a reasonably hard python to target.
Yeah. Well, speaking about hard things to target, what sort of success have you had ticking any of the monitor species off?
Probably pretty poor. And in all truthfulness, I probably don't even target them.
Yeah, okay.
I do love monitors. Monitors are great. And I've got good friends that, I've studied them over the years and but I've just never been inclined to photograph or even target, many monitor species. Or lizards in general. I love snakes. I love photographing snakes, and I'll photograph, snakes every day if I could. But for some reason, I just don't seem to photograph a hell of a lot of other species, and I'm trying to change that, especially being, here on the East Coast now and trying to photograph a few things other than snakes. Because quite honestly, they don't seem to be as prevalent over here as they were in the Pilbara. So got to photograph something.
Yeah.
What was the drive like over from west over here? Did you do a bit of herping on the way, or did you kind of just...
I started out with good intentions to, road crews and that sort of thing along the way, and just there was nothing.
Yeah.
Going right across WA just through South Australia and just seeing kilometre after kilometre of nothing. No life at all. They're just such well-travelled roads. That's probably just had a slow, devastating effect on the population densities, near the highways there, because I didn't see a hell of a lot. Even roadkill, was very minimal. I only found a handful of different species along the way that have been clobbered. The occasional live one that you might come across, but it was quite depressing actually that there was just didn't really see a hell of a lot of wildlife coming over. So then I just sort of decided just keep driving and not really stopping at that point.
Yeah. How you find herping the East Coast compared to the West? Yeah,
different. You guys do things a hell of a bloody cold. I met up with some mates, Jason, Luke, and Shane Walsh recently up in the Royal, and goddamn, it was cold that morning. But we found a texty and some yellow-faced witch snakes and stuff. But yeah, so I mean, our snakes in the Pilbara wouldn't get out of bed for anything less than 25 degrees at night.
Yeah,
so to come over here and it's 25 during the day and I'm feeling cold, I'm thinking, what are we going to find?
Yeah.
You know? But, yeah, so I think just, you know, living and working in the Pilbara for so long, and, you know, these animals require a lot of heat, you know, to get them motivated, to get up and moving, and pretty much like myself. But then to come over here and, you know, everything's colder, wetter,
mossier.
Greener and lush, but mossier. But it is completely different style of, you know, herping to what we would do over there. I mean, we still use the same techniques, like we still road cruise and that sort of thing. But over there, you could pretty much road cruise anything you like. You wouldn't have to, you know, bush bash it through different sort of habitat to try and find your animal, because you pretty much find them all out on the road, you know, and that includes all your gecko species, you know, snakes and monitors. They're all, you know, within the road, regions of the road down there. So,
yeah, you don't really have to go looking for those pockets of forest and stuff like that to be able to go looking for animals so much when the habitat's right there.
You know, or getting lost in the Royal National Park because, you know, your guide's taken a wrong turn and you end up having to push through some thick bush and ferns and stuff. So
that wasn't Shane, was it?
No, that was Jason. And what's funny is he lives there.
Yeah, I can't say that I've been herping with Jason. I do know of him, but I've been herping with Shane quite a few times, and he's a good bloke. I really like Shane.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you've come at probably like one of the cooler times for our herping on the East Coast, so it's, you know, kind of coming into the off season for it. So, as most herpers would say, it's flipping season. So,
pretty much.
To find anything, you got to wake them up yourself. Yeah. So, do you have any herp trips that are actually planned for up and down the East Coast?
Nothing that's set in concrete at the moment. Still sort of getting myself established here, and you know, just working out the local scene, and you know, just trying to find what I can locally at the moment. But there are tentative plans, obviously, just to probably go a little bit west, you know, into around Cobar and you know, as well as into the more northern beaches and northern regions, Hawkesbury, you know, up to Maitland and stuff like that. And I think the first big trip might be Brigalow. It's a region I've always, you know, wanted to sink my teeth into because there's some amazing animals out there. So I think that will probably be the first big one. Just do a Brigalow belt run.
I like how you come out here this way and then you're kind of already going towards those arid areas again. It's kind of, yeah. You can see that it's in your blood, that's for sure.
Staying away from the leeches and going to the flies.
Yeah, absolutely. Had enough of the leeches already.
Flies are good. I'd much rather the flies than the leeches.
The leeches are terrible at the moment.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been very wet, that's for sure. So, I'm going out on a limb here and saying that you've never actually been a reptile keeper as such, but your partner has recently come home with a python, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, actually, it was, I think, a few days after I arrived. I got her a Murray Darling. She already has several other pythons, but bought the new one, little Murray Darling, was one she's always wanted. So, happened to see one and picked one up for her.
Oh, that's awesome. How do you find like the change from obviously seeing these animals in the wild to then seeing them in captivity?
Look, I don't mind the whole captive scene. I was never really intrigued enough to want to keep myself.
Yeah.
And being FIFO, I guess, you know, could have accommodated it, but just lived with people that didn't like snakes or would want them around the house. So never really thought about keeping, quite honestly. And in my own personal opinion, I prefer seeing them out in the wild. I prefer finding them out there, photographing them out there, because I think in nature they just look brilliant, and it's so hard to replicate. When you just come across, a desert death adder for the first time, and there's those vibrant oranges and yellows highlighting the road. It's just you can't beat that.
Yeah.
No matter how many you keep, finding them out there in the wild, I just get that rush every time.
Yeah.
So, and I love that. And I love the fact that you can see them out in the wild just looking as brilliant as they do. So that's where I prefer to find them and prefer to photograph them and see them slither off into the distance. There's just nothing more rewarding, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think it's something to do with the thrill of the hunt as well, trying to find an animal as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Well, when you got it in captivity, you know where it is. So if you ever want it, you just go straight to it. You're not going to get an adrenaline rush every time you walk into your reptile room.
No, exactly.
Open enclosure, and it's there.
Yeah. Oh, mate, well, this has been an absolute ball having you on to just chat herping, chat reptile finding and all the rest of it. Before we sign off here, did you want to throw out anywhere where people can actually find some of your photos to have a look at?
So basically, pretty much only utilise two platforms, being Facebook and Instagram. So it's Adam Brice Wild Nature on both. That's it pretty much, except for those that follow my own personal page. I post a whole bunch of stuff there as well. But but Adam Brice Wild Nature, Facebook and Instagram is my main two.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, for anybody out there, make sure you do go check out Adam's photos, because he's got some really incredible stuff, and everything too, not just reptiles. So there's a good host of other sorts of stuff, and I actually really like your spider photography as well.
Yeah, I was looking at that before.
Yeah, there'll be more of that happening on the East Coast, because I've got a few friends around the place that actually keep funnel webs and mouse spiders and trapdoors and that sort of thing. But we're going for a probably good look for them out in the wild as well, because quite honestly, that's where I prefer to see anything out in the wild, and just seeing the web layouts of some of our myglemorph species of spiders are just quite impressive, and to photograph them out there will be pretty good. So I'm looking forward to that.
I have to ask just quickly before we do sign off here, are you going to become an orchid photographer as well?
There's it's something they tried, and something I've actually have delved in Western Australia, because if there's any place that you're going to be to photograph orchids, would be Western Australia. Got the best reptiles and orchids. So I have actually photographed my fair share of Western Australian species of orchids. So would I ever... I don't get excited about finding new species of orchids. They're just a byproduct of herping or looking for other things. But I won't specifically travel to places looking for orchids, I don't think.
That's fair enough. Well, each to their own at the end of the day, I suppose.
Yeah.
Alrighty, guys, we'd like to say a massive thank you to Eric and Owen and the rest of the MPR crew for having us. If you'd like to contact them, it's best to find them at moreliapythonradio.com and email them at info@moreliapythonradio.com. Make sure to follow the MPR network on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. As far as contacting us in our social media platforms, you can email us at australianherpetoculture@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. Make sure to check out our Teespring store for podcast merch. The link is on the Facebook page. To see more of what Jason is doing, make sure to follow him on Facebook and Instagram at The Gecko Effect. And for myself, you can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, and Teespring under Beach of Scaly Beasts. Grab Debbie back next week for another episode of the Australian Herpetoculture podcast. Good night, guys.